was going to jump on, but maybe wait until we start getting some.
You
want to get your phone?
Oh yeah.
And then we'll, there you go. What's up, everybody? We're going to give it a few and see how many we can get on here before we start launching into this recipe. Pizza today. We got our magic bread dough. We're going to make some sauce from scratch during this video. Throw a few toppings on that pizza, get them in the oven, and then cut the video. And I'll throw up a photo of what they look like when we're done.
I mean, I joined. It asks me this every time. I don't know what it means. Then you have to answer it.
Oh, no, because they want you to also. Don't do that.
Okay. Well, I won't. Nothing on that.
So, I'm going to go ahead and go through the recipe from start to finish real quick. You can write it down if you'd like. If you missed anything or want to hear anything again, try to throw it up in the comments. We'll do our best to get to you. So, we're going to start with our tomato sauce. Very simple, classic tomato sauce. I'm not going to overcomplicate this at all. To begin, we need 2 14-ounce cans of tomatoes. The recipe calls for plum tomatoes, but you could use a crushed tomato. You don't have to be too picky about that. So we have 2 14-ounce cans. We have 2 cloves of garlic that we're going to mince. 2 tablespoons of olive oil, bay leaf, some salt and pepper, and a little bit of sugar, and that'll be it. So we're going to start right off the bat with the sauce. So first things first, we got to get this garlic peeled and cut. So if you still have some garlic in the clove with the peel on, the first thing you're going to want to do is lay that knife on top of that garlic and smash it. Okay? Crush that garlic clove, and then now you should have a nice separated clove, and we're going to go in with that knife and begin mincing that garlic. So just a couple of times through with the knife. Bring it all back together. Give it another chop. We want to get them pretty small. We're not gonna blend this sauce in the blender, but you certainly could if you wanted to. So we want to make sure that garlic is small enough where you're not taking big bites of it. And it's noticeable, but not too overwhelming. So a couple of times through with that knife, nice small mince on that garlic. And then we're just gonna get that garlic into our dish. Set it off to the side. So I've already got my oil in my pan. I'm gonna get that oil nice and hot. Get that pan cooking. As soon as that oil's hot, we'll throw that garlic in, stir it around, let that garlic cook a little bit. We'll get the tomatoes in, stir that around, let it heat through so everything's warm, and then we'll add some salt and pepper, a pinch of sugar, and a bay leaf. And then we will move on to making our dough. If you've already made the dough, if you got the recipe from earlier and you made the dough, you can sit tight. It won't take too long, or you can go through another batch of making some dough. The pizzas we're going to do today, we're going to go kale. I got some fresh kale, some onions, and some garlic and cheddar cheese. And then we're just going to go classic pepperoni. So we got a kale and yellow onion pizza and a classic pepperoni. Both of them are going to use a pretty sharp cheddar cheese. So once that oil is nice and hot, or if you're not sure, something you can do is just drop a little garlic. If it starts to bubble and sizzle, you know you're ready. If not, maybe let it sit for a little bit longer. I'm going to give it another couple of seconds here. I'm gonna peel my onion real quick while I'm waiting. This would be a good time to cut those ends off of that onion, pull that peel back, and just get that thing ready to cut for your pizza. Nice, so oil's looking hot. I'm gonna drop that garlic in. I'm gonna grab a spoon, keep that garlic stirring so that it doesn't burn. Now might be a good time to turn the temperature down a little bit so you're not burning that garlic. We're just gonna let it sizzle for a few. And then pretty quickly we will add our tomatoes. Just like we did with that garlic, go ahead and stir that up. Incorporate all that garlic into the sauce. Turn that heat down a little bit so that sauce doesn't start spitting everywhere. We're going to let that sauce heat up so it's hot all the way through so there's no cold tomatoes in there. And then I'll throw in my bay leaf, a little bit of sugar, and some salt and pepper. Could you grab me some sugar? Is there sugar over there? Got my pepper, got my salt, got my sugar. So far you should have that garlic cooked in that pan, sauce is added, tomatoes are added, excuse me, and we're just kind of heating that sauce through, getting everything warm. I'm gonna add in I'm gonna do 2 bay leaves, just because I like bay leaf. And then we're gonna go a little bit of salt. I would recommend tasting this as you go. Add salt to your liking. I'm gonna do probably about 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. A little bit of pepper, just a pinch or two. Get that all mixed, incorporated. And then I'm gonna throw a lid on just so the mess I have to clean up at the end isn't so big. So while that sauce is cooking, we're gonna put together a batch of pizza dough. So first things first, I'm gonna get the dry ingredients into a bowl. So I have my flour, yeast, and salt. I'm gonna dump my bread flour in first. I'm gonna get myself 2 cups of regular all-purpose flour. So that's 2 cups of bread flour, 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Keep that out. I have 1 teaspoon of my instant yeast. Drop that in there. I'm gonna set that aside and I will get my whisk out. Mix that up a little bit here. Next thing I need is my water and my oil. So I need 1 cup of warm water from the tap and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So far we have 2 cups bread flour, 2 cups all-purpose flour, 1 cup of warm water, 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I'm sorry, we're gonna go 1 1/3 cup. I'm mistaken. So we're just gonna add a little bit more water. So 1 1/3 cup of water added to that 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So dough is mixed. I'm gonna give the wet a little whisk. Probably get a little bit more salt. I just used all my salt for my sauce, so I'm gonna get a pinch in my dough. So just literally like what your fingers can pinch, just drop it in there. And if you saw yesterday, I'm a fan of using my hands with this dough. So I'm gonna drop that water in, and then I'm gonna just get right into it using my hands on this dough. Flour your surface. So whatever you're gonna pull your dough out of your bowl and lay it on, you wanna have some flour down so that it's not sticking to that table too much. So just like a little dusting of flour on the table. And then I'm gonna pull my dough out. And I'm just gonna start working this on the table. So pressing into this dough, kind of pressing all those loose pieces into the dough, and then just folding it over on itself and continuing that process for a little while. The dough is gonna be loose. It might be sticky. That's okay. Keep working it. It'll start to incorporate. You can add a little bit of water if you want. Add a little bit of flour if it's not, if that stickiness is hanging out and not going away. And then once you've kind of worked that dough, it looks nice and uniform, everything is incorporated well, you've folded it over a few times, you're gonna dump about a teaspoon of oil into a bowl, and we're gonna place this dough in that bowl to proof.
Bigger one?
That's fine. So we want about 2 hours, maybe 3 on this dough. You might be able to get away with using it a little bit sooner. You'll notice the dough is gonna double, maybe even grow a little bit bigger in size. And when you start to see that, you know that yeast is activated, it's working, and that's a good opportunity for you to go ahead and start using some of that dough. So I've got my bowl. I'm gonna get that oil around. I'm gonna drop my dough in. I'm gonna cover it with a towel, and then I'm gonna place it over here on the back of my oven and just let it proof over there. Yeah. So while that dough is proofing, we're going to prepare the rest of our ingredients. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut up that kale for the first topping. I'm going to check my sauce actually real quick because it's probably cooking really nicely. So we're going to go ahead and take that lid off, give that sauce a stir. Watch out for that bubbling tomato sauce. Woo! It's kicking. It's really going. Awesome. So I'm going to bring that heat down a little bit so it's not just like bubbling over the edge. Clear my space off a little bit here. Alright, so I wish I was better with the technology. I have a way to get my camera to zoom in. Enhance. Does that work? I don't think so. So I'm going to cut my onions. So I've cut these onions in half, I peeled it off, cut both ends, the top and the bottom off of that onion, pulled the peel off, then I sliced that onion in half lengthwise, and now I'm gonna just try to make the thinnest slices of that onion that I can. When I get to about halfway through, I'm gonna flip the onion, and I'm gonna keep cutting thin strips all the way through. Flip that onion at the halfway point. You wanna get that smaller pan going for me?
With just warming it up?
Yeah, for the onions and the kale.
Sure.
Or I guess anyone would really do. So I'm gonna have Lisa get a pan hot for me so that I can drop my onions into it. I'm gonna cut my garlic, I'm gonna crush that clove, chop up a little bit of garlic for the pizza topping. So this is our kale and onion topping. So we have 2 small yellow onions, 2 cloves of garlic, and then 1 bunch of kale. Get that garlic a little bit finer here, a little bit smaller of a chop. Get it in my bowl. So I've got my garlic, I've got my onions, and now I gotta go through my kale. Will you grab me like a fresh piece of kale with the stem on it still? So I like to just try to grab as much kale as I can in my hand, fold it in half, and then just like the onions, just trying to make the thinnest slices that we can. So with that kale, come on a stem like this, I want you to pull off the bottom of that stem and any other really thick, fibrous pieces of that kale. We don't want any of that stem to go onto that pizza. We want to make sure that kale is nice and tender and really soft when it goes on that pizza. So, or when it gets cooked on that pizza. So I'm slicing this kale as thin as I possibly can. And then I like to go back over it with my knife a few times to make sure it is really small. I'll do a little bit more here. Just bunch it up in your hand, fold it over itself, and cut it into the thinnest strips you can, and then just go back over it a few times with your knife, making sure those pieces are really small. So this will be our first topping. Onion. I'm gonna throw that onion in this pan. You think we're good? Yeah.
I do.
So I'm gonna drop my garlic first. Being careful to constantly stir so nothing is burning. And not taking my eye off of that pan for too long. So this is a point where you really want to pay close attention to what you're doing. Don't walk away. Don't let that garlic burn. Maybe even turn that heat down a little bit to control that cook temperature or that cook time. Stir those onions around. Give them a little toss there. Good. And then I'm just gonna let those onions cook down for a little bit before I dump this kale on top. So just to recap, that sauce, we start with 2 tablespoons of olive oil in that pan. Get that oil nice and hot. We're gonna drop in our 2 cloves of garlic that we've minced. We're gonna follow that up after it's cooked for a few seconds with some tomatoes. I had 2 14-ounce cans of tomatoes that I dumped in there. Stir that all up, get that sauce nice and hot, and then we dump in our bay leaf, pinch of salt and pepper, and about 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. And we're gonna let that cook for 20 to 30 minutes. So we want that sauce to cook down a little bit, thicken up, really pull some of that flavor out of there. For our dough, which we have proofing back here, we have 2 cups bread flour, 2 cups of all-purpose white flour, 1 teaspoon of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of olive oil added into our 1 1/3 cup of warm water. We're taking that 1 1/3 cup of warm water plus oil, dumping it into our dry ingredients for that pizza dough, and then with our hands incorporating all that together, bringing it out on that table, kneading that dough, combining it into a nice uniform ball of pizza dough, and then we let that dough proof for a little while. I'm gonna go stir my onions real quick. So before we add that kale, we want to let those onions cook down for a bit. So I like to cook at a pretty high heat and just keep my eye on the pan. But we want those onions to be soft, translucent. We want them to lose that crunchy bite that they have. So probably at least 5 minutes in that pan, some stirring, letting them sit, come back and check them, stir them again, let them sit. In the meantime, while we're waiting to add that kale, we can shred some cheddar. We've got a bunch shredded here, but it's pretty straightforward. Just taking that cheese grater, getting some cheddar. So go ahead and if you've got time or you've got some cheese you need to shred, now would be a good time where you're kind of watching the onions, waiting for things to cook. Check my onions again real quick. So once those onions have cooked down a bit, like mine have, I'm going to dump in my kale right on top of those onions. I think I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to add a little splash of water in here, put a lid on, and just kind of steam that kale down a little bit. Speed up that cooking process. So, I made a dough yesterday, so I'm going to use that dough for our pizzas today, so we don't have to sit here for 2 hours and wait for that dough to proof. Get my station cleaned up. My lovely assistant would grab my pizza dough and maybe even another little cup of flour for me to dust this table with. So here's my dough from yesterday. I actually cut a piece of this off last night and made some flatbread with it just to try it out. It was pretty good. I'm happy with it. So before you drop that pre-made dough that you have on the table, we want to get a little bit of flour down to roll that dough out. Don't forget about that kale. Cook that kale down. We really want that kale to soften up a bit so it doesn't burn on the pizza. We want it to be cooked and tender, not cooked and crispy. So we're getting there. I'm going to turn the heat down on it a little bit so it doesn't burn. So I got my flour down. So when you have your dough, I would recommend cutting it in half to have 2 pieces, and then cutting that in half so that you have 4 pieces, 4 equal pieces of dough, ideally. It's a very simple way to get equal amounts. So I'm going to have my dough with a knife, And then I'm gonna have that, and I'm gonna use that ball as my pizza dough. Set those aside. I'll put my other dough back. And now I'm just gonna roll that dough out. I'll be honest with you, I'm a fan of using my hands with pizza dough. So I like to press between my fingers and thumbs and kind of work that dough a little bit. At some point, you're gonna have to use that roller though. So, little tip when you're rolling out dough, always rotate it about a quarter turn every time. So roll it out as far as you can. Give it a quarter turn, maybe even flip it, and then keep rolling. And we want to really try to get this dough as thin as we can. And the more you stretch it out, the thinner it will get. And you can even add a little bit of flour if you find your dough sticking to that counter. Drop a little bit of flour on it. A couple more turns here and this one will be done. Thought about trying to...
Want a sheet pan?
Sure. Go ahead and give it the little classic toss. Oh. Get some of that dough off of there, or some of that flour. So if you have an oven or a pizza oven pan, a pizza pan, this would be a great time. Throw it on that pizza pan. You could use a sheet pan. That's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna take that first dough and just a general rule of thumb, fold that dough in half, fold it in half the other way. So now I have this little square, and then I'm gonna lay that on the, I don't know, about halfway down that pan. I'm gonna open it up one way, open it up the other way, and I have my pizza dough on that pan. I'm gonna do my next one, use some of that flour. Give my kale and onion a quick peek. Looks good. So I'm gonna turn that off and let that sit. Check my sauce. Sauce is looking good. Gotta give it a taste. If you're using the plum tomatoes, this would be a great time for you to crush those tomatoes with a fork. Break them down a little bit. We don't want whole tomatoes in here. It's pretty good. Tastes like pizza sauce. Alright, so I'm going to roll out this last dough. We're going to let that go for a little while. And then very shortly here, we will put all this together and say goodbye. And I will follow through on this video with a photo of the finished product. Hopefully some of y'all do the same. This video, Athletes, is going to go up on the YouTube channel along with the one we did yesterday. So no worries if you didn't get this or you want to catch it later. This will be forever available on the internet. So just as you're rolling that dough out, remembering to constantly rotate it. Little turn every time. So we're getting that nice round shape. Make sure you're not letting that dough get sticky. You can add a little bit of flour to the top or flip it periodically. And as you roll that dough out, it should get easier and easier to kind of make that nice, big pizza platform. Got a couple more here, and then this one should be done. Can you pull out a little bit of sauce from that pan for me?
Do you want it in a ladle?
Sure. So what I'm doing is I'm asking Lisa to pull some of that sauce out for me, so it's just not so hot when I put it on this dough. So now would be a good chance. You can pause, take some time, pull some of that tomato sauce out. I'm going to give this one more round of rolling. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to fold it in half once, fold it in half twice the other way, place that on my pan in the corner, and then open that dough up. Boom, beautiful. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just place a tiny bit of sauce right in the center, not even a full ladle. You can see this ladle I have here, it's not even a full one, it's about half a ladle. And then I'm just going to push my ladle down in the center and just start making small circles and pushing that sauce out as far as I can. Might add a little bit more. It's always better to start with less and add than have too much right in the beginning. Good. So, pepperonis, you can get creative here. I'm going to be greedy and use all of the pepperonis, because why not? I'm going to have to spread these out a little bit more. I think I got too greedy. So laying these pepperonis out, lining that whole pizza with some pepperoni. Oven should be preheated. Sorry if we didn't say that in the beginning. Get that oven preheated. Probably 425 is about where you want to be. Nice and hot for that pizza. And then I'm just going to get all these pepperonis on here. I don't really care if they're overlapping. I'm going to take some cheese, some of that sharp cheddar cheese that I had, and I'm just going to sprinkle it on the top. Don't overdo it with the cheese. Cheese can really make a pizza fall apart. You don't need a ton. Just want to kind of loosely cover that pizza. And then I'm going to take some of my kale and onion mix that I have here. And I'm going to add this. Ooh, I got to get my sauce on there first. What am I doing? So I'm going to get that sauce on that pizza first. So same thing, a little bit of sauce in the center. And then we just start with small circles, pushing that sauce all around that pizza. Just the rest of that. Oven is ready. Good. Just make sure you don't over sauce that pizza. It may not look like a lot, it may look thin, but what we don't want is a super wet pizza at the end. It'll be really hard to eat that pizza. So now I got my sauce on. I'm going to use my hands, and I'm going to sprinkle that kale onion mix all over this pizza. Get a good even coverage. And then add the cheese. Same thing, we don't want to overdo that pizza. Get a little bit of cheese on there. Boom, there we go. That's our pizza. So you will have a lot of sauce left over. That's okay. You can freeze it. You can can it. Use it as pasta sauce. I don't know.
It's really helpful to freeze it in individual bags, so then
Right.
you can thaw out a pizza or two's worth.
Yeah, so don't dump all your sauce in a gallon bag, throw it in the freezer, and then have to thaw that entire bag again. You want to do like maybe smaller Ziploc bags, maybe do 1 or 2 cups of sauce at a time. freeze it, and then you have a bunch of bags of pizza sauce that you can pull out as you want. So we're gonna end this video, but let me just give you a quick look at the pizzas that we put together, and then I'll follow up with a photo of our finished product here at the end. So see if I can do this. So that's our kale. Let's be smarter about this. That's our kale onion pizza.
No, there you go.
That's our pepperoni, classic pepperoni pizza. Dough made from scratch. Sauce made from scratch. All in under 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Those of you that are waiting on your dough to proof, you have a little bit of time before that dough is ready. Here's mine. Give it an hour or two. Cut off a section for your pizza, and then revisit this video on our YouTube channel, and you can make this pizza from scratch. I'm signing off now. I'll follow up with a finished product. And those of you that missed the live, we will be putting this up on the YouTube channel with a recipe and instructions, so you can make this anytime you want. Thanks, y'all. See you later.